You ever hear something strange at night? A sound that doesn't belong? Maybe a soft whisper, a knock on the window, or something worse, something you can't explain. What if I told you there's a creature in Japan that hunts people? A spirit so terrifying that once she chooses you, you can never escape? Some call her the Japanese Slenderman. Others call her a nightmare. But her real name is Hachishakusama. And if you ever hear the sound it might already be too late. It started as a simple trip to the countryside. Just a boy visiting his grandparents, enjoying the fresh air, the quiet life, the warmth of family. He always loved these trips, running through the fields, feeling the soft grass under his feet, eating his grandmother's home-cooked meals. It was peaceful, safe, but not this time. This time something was different. It happened in the late afternoon, just before the sun dipped behind the hills. The boy had been playing outside, kicking pebbles along the stone path, when he saw something unusual near the garden. A figure. At first, he thought it was just a scarecrow, tall, thin, unmoving. But then his eyes adjusted. It was a woman, dressed in white. Something about her didn't feel right. She was too tall. Not just a little tall, unnaturally tall. Almost 8 feet. Her long black hair draped over her face, covering her features, making it impossible to see her eyes. But even without looking into them, he felt her watching him. Then he heard it. Puh, 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 a soft, deep sound, like a low chuckle, yet somehow hollow. He shivered. He turned away for just a second, his heart hammering in his chest. When he looked back, she was gone. The boy ran inside, breathless, his face pale. He told his grandparents what he had seen, expecting them to brush it off, maybe say he imagined it. But instead, their faces drained of color. His grandmother grabbed his arm. "Are you sure?" she asked in a whisper. Was she wearing white? Was she tall? He nodded. His grandfather stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Without a word, he picked up the phone and started making calls. The boy didn't understand. His grandmother held on to him tightly, murmuring prayers under her breath. His parents were called. A priest arrived. Something was wrong. That night, they locked him in a room. They placed charms on the walls, bowls of salt in the corners, and told him not to open the door. No matter what, he didn't sleep. How could he? The memory of that tall, ghostly woman haunted him. The way she stood there, too still, too silent except for that sound. Puh, puh, puh. Then, just past midnight, he heard it again. Not outside, not in the distance, right next to his window. He clamped a hand over his mouth, his entire body frozen. Puh, puh, puh. He squeezed his eyes shut. It's not real. It's not real. Then he heard something even worse. A voice. "It's me, Grandma. Open the door, dear." His heart stopped. The voice sounded exactly like his grandmother. Soft, kind, warm. But she wasn't outside. He knew she wasn't. He wanted to believe it was her. He almost reached for the door handle. But something held him back. A feeling. A whisper of instinct screaming in his mind. Do not open it. So he stayed still, biting his lip so hard it almost bled. The voice spoke again, sweeter this time. "It's okay. You don't have to be scared. Open the door, sweetheart." He squeezed his eyes shut, covered his ears. The voice changed. It dropped into something deeper, something wrong. "Let me in." The sound of scratching. Slow, deliberate. Fingernails against the wood. The scratching turned to knocking, then to pounding. He curled up under his blanket, shaking, praying for morning to come. At some point, the noise stopped. When the sun finally rose, the door was still locked. His grandparents and the priest came in, checking the room. The bowls of salt had turned black. The priest sighed in relief. "We still have time," he said, "but he must leave. Immediately." And so he did. His parents took him far away, back to the city. He never saw his grandparents' home again, never stepped foot in that village. Because once she chooses you, She never stops looking. Hachishakusama, the 8-foot-tall woman, the spirit who hunts young people. People say she only appears once every few years. That if you hear her voice, it's already too late. Pa, pa, pa. Some say it's just a story, a legend to scare children. But the boy, he never went back. He never forgot. And sometimes when the wind blows just right, he swears he can still hear it. Pa, pa, pa. Do you think it's just a myth? Or do you think she's real? If you ever hear that sound, don't look. Don't answer. And whatever you do, don't open the door. If you want more terrifying stories, make sure to subscribe to my channel. But be careful. Some stories, they don't just stay as stories. Sometimes, they follow you home.